What's up, folks? BCSG here, and today is my review on the Piscifun Phantom.
Yes, yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, fish on. Ooh, this guy's really fighting. Oh, it's a big one. Damn, it's a big one. Look at that. Woo. Oh, fish on. Fish on, fish on. No. Nope. Hit just at the bank some more, yeah. Hey bro, on the pause man, I randomly paused it on this little spinner, whatever you call it. Okay. Oh, Kim! Oh. 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 Line, there's a line there. Oh.
Now, for those of you who have been following my channel, you know that I've done unboxing on this. I did it sometime in November, I believe, late November last year. And following that, in December, I did a casting distance shootout, pitting this reel against some of my way more expensive reels, and mostly in the Shimano lineup. And since then, of course, if you follow me on Instagram or on Facebook, you would see that I've put quite a bit of time into this reel on the water, even so much as bringing it to Baralang saltwater ponds to put it under as big of a stress test as I could get within reach. And so it's been about three and a half months now since I've gotten this reel, and I think it's more than enough time for me to come up with a review that, unlike my Surinoya XF50, which didn't include the durability aspect, this review will. 3.5 months is reasonable enough for me to at least stake some sort of claim on the durability of the reel. But before we go into the review, I just want to talk about a few things first. It's difficult to come up with a good, reliable review matrix or review system like Tackle Tour, for example. Tackle Tour has one of the best and most well thought out review matrices, whatever you call that, in the market today when it comes to reel reviews. They're so detailed, you know, everything is empirical. They have all these scales testing the drag, consistency and all that, and of course I can't do that. After getting some feedback from you folks at home and talking to some of my my angling friends, there's a fine line between what is empirical and quantifiable and what is personal opinion. And naturally, the more detailed you go, the more technical you need to be, meaning you need to get specialized equipment, you need to do specialized measurements, and you need to have all of that. You need to have a very good way of doing a shootout, for example, multiple cameras, or you have to have a very good system. And I just, you know, that's a bit too much for my plate to handle. So I'm gonna take a step back from being all technical and precise and leave that to the folks who are really good at doing that, like Tackle Tour, or if for you guys who prefer watching videos on YouTube, there is a really good channel that does reel reviews. It's called The Reel Test, and he is so detailed. He measures everything. He's got a whole system down. He has experience with all brands. Unlike me, I don't really have much experience with Daiwa. He really knows what he's talking about. So for those of you who appreciate a more technical video, definitely, I'll put a link in the description below. Definitely hop over to his channel. I believe he also has a video on the Piscifun Phantom. I remember watching him doing an unboxing. I'm pretty sure he's probably going to do some shootout or some review on the reel, but I don't think it is out yet because he got his reel a lot later than I did. Definitely hop over to his channel, watch his stuff. It's really good stuff, I promise you. It's called The Reel Test, link in the description. Anyway, so for my videos, taking a step back, I'm going to focus a little bit more on the user experience side of things, my personal experiences with the reel, my personal opinions, what I think of the reel, with the goal of maybe helping you guys get a better idea of what to expect from the reel. So how I've changed the review system is I've changed, and of course at the end of this, I will also show you how I implemented that same rating scale on the Surinoya XF50 and what the result was. Okay, so what I did was, instead of putting everything out of 10 points, I'm still rating on the same categories, but instead of putting each category out of 10 points, because 10 points means I gotta quantify what each point means, and that's 10 points to quantify, and I can't quantify all 10 points. So I've reduced that number to 4 points per category, with the exception, as I mentioned in my Surinoya video, the value category gets double the points. And of course, durability is included in this as well. And I've included another category, which is viable competition at a given price point. Now what that means is, are there any other rods or reels that I think are worth using that happen to fall in the same price point as this reel? And the way it's rated, it's out of 4 points as well, but it's rated a little bit different. So for every other category, this is what the rating means. 1 is below expectations, 2 is average, 3 is good, and 4 is excellent. Right? So as you can see, I have now really scaled it and made it really simple. It's an opinion declaration rather than an empirical declaration. For the competition category, still out of 4 points, 1 means there's lots of competition, 2 means there's some competition in that price point, 3 is there's very little competition, meaning maybe 1 or 2 reels if you search hard enough, that kind of thing, and 4 points means there is absolutely no competition. So you can assume that the Surinoya XF50 gets a full 4 points because there is no reel in that category. So that's an example. Okay, so now that I've broken down how this is going to work, let's just get straight into the review. First off, I'm going to talk about the basic info of the Piscifun Phantom. Now this is a 7:1 gear ratio reel, which would be considered a high gear ratio reel. It is a claimed 162 grams reel weight. It has 6 plus 1, so 7 bearings in total. It is a one-piece carbon frame. It has a dual brake system, meaning it has both a magnetic and a centrifugal brake, which is on the inside, magnetic, centrifugal. And of course the magnetic brakes are adjustable on the outside. And it has an aluminum, a machined aluminum spool, like most reels do. It has a triple carbon drag stack, which I'll get into later. It just means it has a carbon drag. And lastly, it has carbon swept back handle with EVA knobs. So that's all the specifications of this reel. So now let's get into the first category, which is weight. Now if you guys watched my unboxing video, you know that I weighed this reel and it came in at 160 grams. So plus minus, you know, it's claimed at 162, it weighed in at 160. You gotta put line on the reel and all that. So I would say this reel came in smack on at the claimed weight of 162 grams. For that, I give it a full 4 out of 4. It's excellent. Next category, we have materials. What is the reel made of? Now, I'm not going to comment on build quality because that's for the refinement category. I'm just going to talk about the materials, right? So this reel is pretty much completely made of carbon. Right? Carbon side plates, carbon reel frame, carbon handle, carbon star drag. I mean, I believe it's carbon. I'm looking at this, and it even looks like the clutch bar is made of carbon, though I could be wrong, and it might be made of plastic. So largely carbon. You've got a brass pinion gear, you've got aluminum main gear, you have a triple carbon drag stack. What that means is it simply means there are 3 carbon washers in the stack, or the drag stack. Yeah, so it has a carbon drag, EVA knob. So from a materials perspective, you know, it even has a little rubber sticker on that clutch bar, which so let me see here. Alright, my Chronac 200, right? This plastic and it's textured. It's not actually rubber. My Core 51 MG7 on the other hand, that clutch bar has an actual rubber coating on the top, or rubber sticker on the top, and I appreciate it when there's that rubber thing because it assists in a bit of friction, you know, it makes it more tactile. So from a materials perspective, I'm going to give this a 3 out of 4. And good. Now, why did I not give it a 4, a full 4? That is because as a personal preference, I believe certain parts of a reel should be made of metal. One being the thumb bar. It can have that rubber coating or rubber sticker, but it should be made of metal. Definitely not plastic, and I really hope this isn't plastic. I mean, I took a look underneath, it looks like it has a carbon texture to it, so I hope it's at least carbon or graphite or whatever, you know. That star drag, I would much prefer if the star drag was made of metal, you know. Why is having so much carbon not necessarily the best thing, even though clearly that explains why the reel is so light? Because carbon is brittle. It's really brittle. I don't want some sort of little knock or drop, right? And have one of my one of the stars or the tips in the star drag just kind of crack off. It's not that it's going to happen, right? I mean, it hasn't happened yet, you know, but there's always that possibility, right? So I'm always a bit tentative when I see too much carbon on a product. So because of that, even though there have been no issues, I'm taking off 1 point, and I wouldn't say it's excellent, I'd say it's good. So 3 out of 4 for materials. Next category we have refinement. A quick overview of the reel. If you guys watched my unboxing video, this reel is a really good looking reel. It's matte finish, it's black. Green's not my favorite color, but it's green accents, it still looks good. You know, the star drag, positive clicking. The spool tension knob, a bit soft, but still positive clicking, right? The mag brakes, externally adjustable, positive clicking. The centrifugal brakes, likewise, positive clicks. Only downside is you do have to kind of push the spool out just slightly, which is no issue on the water. I mean, I do it even with some of my Shimano reels. Right? Just push the spool a little bit out so you can grab onto that adjustment and you adjust it like that. Once again, positive clicks with 6 adjustments. And if you watch my unboxing, you know that I discovered an errant glob of grease on the brake track. So yeah, maybe they kind of missed that in the QC, or after they put the grease in after the fact or whatever and didn't check. But that was easy enough to get rid of. Just a quick clean would do. So from a first glance perspective, this reel looks great. All right. However, when you closely inspect the reel, there are a few things, minor things that crop up. Right. Firstly, as I think I mentioned that in my unboxing video as well, you can see that there's a very slight gap between this part of the side plate and the reel frame. Now the side plate itself, it doesn't move, it fits really snugly, but there is just that little bit of space right at the front here. Now, I don't know whether that was intentional or not. Logically, I would assume it wasn't intentional and it's a tolerance issue. It doesn't affect the performance of the reel, the parts don't shake, but it is definitely something worth mentioning, especially in the refinement category, because as you can see, I've got my Shimano wheels here, got the Abu, MGX and all that, and there's no gaps on any of the parts at all, whereas this one has a small gap. Right, so another little issue that I noticed is, and I didn't pick this up in my, I don't think I picked this up in the unboxing, is the clutch bar, or the thumb bar, whatever you call it, does have a little bit of side-to-side play. Once again, this has not proven to have any effect on performance. You know, I didn't even notice it until after I've used it for like 2 months, and then one day I was kind of cleaning the reel and I was like, oh wait a minute, so there's actually some play. Okay, so there is a little bit of play here. Once again, didn't affect performance, but something worth mentioning nonetheless. The bearings, they look like any other sealed stainless steel bearing that I have in any of my other reels, so can't complain there. Now, much like any other reel, once you spend enough time on the water, the bearings do get a little bit noisier, but just a quick couple of drops of something like Shimano's Phantom oil or something like that, and it smoothens up back to normal real quick. So, because of the little issue with the thumb bar, you know, and the little gap in the side plate, I'm going to take off 1 point and I'm going to give the refinement category 3 out of 4, which is a good. Now, the next category we have is the brake system. And this reel has a very interesting brake system in the sense that it is one of the rare reels that has 2 different brake systems in one. Now, it's not that it's unheard of. There are reels with dual brake systems, but they're not common, not that common. Usually, it's one brake or the other, either centrifugal or magnetic. So you have the magnetic brake, which is externally adjustable, and it works very similarly to any other magnetic brake, right? Turning the knob causes the magnetic plate to move in and out closer or further away from the spool. And then you have the centrifugal brake that as you set it, it has feet, right? As you can see the feet at the side. So basically turning this allows the feet to protrude even further, and therefore exerting more force on the brake track. On paper, having a dual brake system is like a dream come true, because centrifugal brakes tend to manage the start of the cars, manage overruns at the start of the cars, and magnetic brakes tend to do better at managing the line as it slows down towards the end of the cast. So theoretically, having both in one gives you the best of both worlds. You manage the entire cast. And this is just my opinion, but I feel that if a centrifugal brake and magnetic brake were to be properly kind of married, paired up, you know, ideally to me, because centrifugal brakes are adjusted on the inside, you should be able to set and forget the centrifugal brake. Say I set it at, I put it at 2 and I leave it there, and then any other adjustment necessary for almost anything, I would be able to do it with the magnetic brake. What I noticed with this is that I could do that to a certain extent, but once it got a bit too windy or the conditions got a bit tough, you know, or the lures got a bit lighter, I had to open the side plate to adjust the centrifugal brakes a little bit too much for my liking, considering this has dual brakes and it's externally adjustable. Now I have to add though that coming from the Shimano side of things, using this old Shimano VBS brake system, I'm very used to pretty much opening the side plate and adjusting the brakes throughout my entire session if needed, right? But the point here is this wheel comes with 2 different brakes and one of them is externally adjustable. I would like to have been able to just set and forget one and externally adjust the other to completely make up for it. Unfortunately, about 30% of the time I found myself having to access the side plate to the centrifugal brakes and adjust it from there. And another thing on top of that I noticed about the brakes is that I mentioned in many of my videos that I do not like oiling centrifugal brakes. I feel that, you know, it's like a vicious cycle. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, so to speak. You put oil on the brakes, it makes it really smooth. You have to get used to the fact that it's so smooth. And once you're used to casting oiled centrifugal brakes, over time, that oil's gonna clog up, it's going to pick up dust, it's going to pick up grime, or even it's going to start, the oil's just going to come off, and then the casting performance starts suffering, and you're going to have to open it, clean it, and oil it again. So it's like one of those things that once you start oiling your brakes, you're going to have to keep oiling the brakes or the performance is just going to drop off. Whereas if you run centrifugal brakes dry all the time, all you really need to do is clean them once in a while, and you pretty much get the same performance, in my opinion. But with this reel, what I noticed was when I ran the centrifugal brakes dry, I felt that the centrifugal brakes were a little bit too powerful. What I mean by that is even at the setting of 1, which is the lowest setting out of the 6. I felt that I could go lower. I could do better if I could set it at a lower setting. Now I could turn off the centrifugal brakes entirely and turn up the mag brakes. I could definitely do that, but that kind of defeats the purpose of having a dual brake system reel. You should be able to use both of them in tandem. So what I ended up doing was what I don't like doing, which is oiling the brakes. But once I did that, night and day. So maybe this reel was meant to be run with oil on the centrifugal brakes, because once I oiled it, the reel performed just the way I liked it. You know, I had it set to 2 or 3, and that gave me some room to both adjust up and adjust down when it came to the centrifugal brakes. So all things considered, I give the brakes a 2 out of 4. This is a dual brake system reel. It defeats the purpose if the dual brake system doesn't function, doesn't marry well and function in tandem. And for that reason, you know, I gave it a 2 out of 4. The next category we have is drag. And the drag on this reel was functional out of the box. It was smooth in regular use, and as I mentioned, it's a carbon drag. I opened it up, I checked 3 carbon washers. So, you know, it was decent. However, when I started playing around with the higher end of the drag spectrum, which means when I started turning it a bit heavier, you know, like at Baralang, you know, I had to really crank the drag all the way down. What I noticed was that at about 75% drag force and above, the drag would start to get a little bit jerky, in the sense that, not that it would jerk like a normal inconsistent drag would, but it would start kind of, it's almost like, but you could feel the drag pulsing. That's the word I'm looking for. You can feel the drag pulsing. And, well, this is where I made a mistake. Being the person that is just so used to, oh, my reel has this issue, I fix it, right? My first instinct was, okay, the drag is pulsing, it's not a problem I've not faced before, I know exactly what needs to be done. I open up the reel, I apply a light film of drag grease on the washers, I put it back in, and bam, no issues. Silky smooth drag, just like what I expected, and I didn't think much of it after that. That is until I started preparing for this review. The problem is, this reel comes in at a claimed 17 pounds of drag. And by the time I realized that I hadn't tested the max drag, I had already put grease on the drag washers. So I don't know whether that made a difference. I don't think it did. I hope it didn't. But the fact is, I don't really know for sure if it made a difference. But when I actually went to test the max drag force of this reel, and how I tested it was very simple. I would turn it down, right, to the point where, right, finger tight, no more than this, none of that, just finger tight, right, so it's not moving anymore. And then I tie it to my scale and I pull on it, and I'd look at the number to see what that number hovers around, and I do that a few times. At a claimed 17 pounds, it clocked in at an average of 7.7 pounds of drag. And now that is not ridiculously low. It isn't. I have some Shimano reels that can barely hit 7. You know, the Bay Game clocks in at almost 10. The Chronap E clocks in at almost 10, 9 point something. You know, so most of the reels I have go from about 6.5 pounds to about 10 pounds of drag. So 7.7 pounds of drag is not exactly, it's kind of right smack in the spectrum of most of my reels. You know, but the problem is it claims it has a 17 pound claim drag, and even without putting grease, I'm just gonna give that 10 pounds at max. So this reel does not hit the claim max drag of 17 pounds. I don't know how they came up with that number. Maybe they really kind of went to town with this, and like, you know, yeah, okay, of course if I did that, yeah, I can't even turn the handle, and yeah. So maybe that's what they meant. For that reason, the drag gets a 2 out of 4. I would have given it a 1, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt because I screwed it up and I put grease before I actually tested it. I'm going to add 1 more point for that, and that's on me. I completely screwed that part up. So the drag gets a 2 out of 4. Next category we have distance. Alright, and this one you already saw my casting shootout. This reel casts really well in the distance department, and I give this a 4 out of 4, an excellent in distance. So moving on, we have the lure weight range. Much like the Surinoya review, what this means is the range, a comfortable range in which I can cast reliably with this reel. And throughout my last 3 months or so of testing, I would put this reel's comfortable range at 5.5 grams and above. Okay, you know, I could cast all the way down to 4 grams but it's with very specific lures. It's mainly metal jigs and things that are more aerodynamic. But once you get into the longer, less aerodynamic stuff, this reel starts having problems below 5.5 grams. So therefore, I put the limit at 5.5 grams. So for the lure range department, going down to 5.5 grams, I give this reel a 3 out of 4. And that is because I have some regular size bait casting reels that can cast maybe down to 4.5 grams. Next category we have our intangibles, and this is of course full-on personal opinion and my experience with the reel and all that. You know, so over the last 3.5 months, this reel has been a pleasure to use. It's light, you know, there's no play, it feels solid. I brought it to Baralang, I really put it through its paces, you know, through all the Baralang fish. Anyone who's been to Baralang before, you know the kind of fish that they have there. You know, they fight really hard, groupers fight really, really hard, and I brought it to my usual fishing spots, doing my usual stuff, jungles, and tested it out in that kind of scenario as well, you know, and the reel performed pretty well across the board. But of course, like I mentioned in the brakes section, I do feel that the mag brakes are just a bit lacking. I would have preferred that the mag brakes be about 10 to 15% stronger so that I could set and forget the centrifugal brakes and just rely on using the mag brakes for virtually everything. That would have been perfect. A 4 out of 4 for me. But because of that, I'm giving the intangibles a 3 out of 4, which is good. Now, of course, now we come to the value section of it. All right, and coming in at 90 something Singapore dollars, under $100, and for what you get, this reel scores perfect in the value section. A 4 out of 4 multiplied by 2, so it gets an 8 out of 8. Okay, at this price point, it's hard to debate the value of this reel at this price point. So 8 out of 8 in the value department. Now for durability, as I mentioned, I've got 3.5 months with this reel. I think it's long enough to make some sort of statement on the durability. 3.5 months of moderate and in Baralang heavy use, and I've felt absolutely no degradation of performance. I felt no change. I've nothing rattles. You know, the reel is still rock solid. There's still no play, and I would say that's pretty durable. I mean, I've had reels, branded reels, Shimano, my favorite brand. Ironically, right? I'm a bit biased here. You know me and Shimano, right? I've had Shimano reels completely crap out on me in less than 3 months of light use. Alright, and those reels, they might not be high-end Shimano reels, but they're certainly more expensive than this one. Yeah, I've even had a Daiwa spinning reel crap out of me, the frames. Alright, so 3.5 months, 4 out of 4 in durability. At least moderate short-term durability. Once again, it's impossible for me to talk about the long-term durability. I haven't had it that long. Alright, but at least now I've had it long enough and put it through its paces to give you a decent indication of what to expect from the durability of this reel. Now for the last category, we have viable competition at this price point, which means, are there any reels at the sub $100 price point that are viable competition to this reel? And yes, there are somewhat, you know, but generally those reels you would find them in the big brands, but they usually, the quality is compromised somewhat. They have no bearings or very few bearings. The reel's a lot heavier. They still cast well, you know, because at the end of the day, what you really care about is casting performance, right? And that's what I deem as viable competition. So there are viable competitors out there in the sub $100 price range. Not too many, but there definitely are. So for this, I would give it a 2 out of 4, which is some competition. Okay, so that's all the scores right there. All of this totals in a total possible score of 48. And this reel achieves a 38 out of 48. And when you extrapolate that to something that is out of 10, you get 7.9 out of 10. Now this is how I'm going to rate the scores out of 10. If it's between 1 and 2, it's horrible. If it's between 3 and 4, it's below average. 5, of course, is average. 6 is above average. 7 is good, worth considering. 8 is very good, worth considering. 9 is great, worth buying. And 10, which I believe is impossible to achieve. It's incredible. You need to buy it right now. So at 7.91, this reel falls very comfortably into the good, worth considering category. Now, as I said at the start of this video, I will be revisiting the Surinoya XF50 with the same scale, and of course I don't want this video to be 3 hours long, so I'm just going to tell you what score it achieved. I applied the same ratings to the Surinoya X50. The Piscifun Phantom was out of 48, a total possible score of 48. The Surinoya is out of 44 because I couldn't talk about durability, but the way it works is still the same because it's still something out of something, and I extrapolate that and put it over 10, right? So the Surinoya scored a 37 out of 44, which is an 8.41 out of 10, which puts it very comfortably into the very good, worth considering category. Alright folks, so that pretty much wraps up my review of the Piscifun Phantom. Once again, I'd like to thank Piscifun for sending me this reel for review. You guys have a pretty good reel here. And of course, like I mentioned at the start of the video, if you guys want a more technical look into this reel, you know, this is more of an opinion-based review. If you want a more technical video, stay tuned to the reel test. I'm pretty sure his channel is going to have a video on the Piscifun Phantom really soon. Or if not, by the time this video comes up, his video might be out already. You know, so stay tuned to his channel, links in the description. And of course, if you like this review, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, share this video and share my channel with your friends. Get them to subscribe too for more awesome content. If you didn't like it, as usual, give me a thumbs down, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Tight lines, guys.